Before there was a garden, before there was a serpent, before there was a human choice or a human fall, there was God. No ticking clock, no unfolding timeline, no before or after the way we understand it. Only eternity. And within that eternity, a question that has haunted human thought for thousands of years. Did God know that humanity would sin before he ever created us? If the answer is yes, then another question immediately follows. Why create us anyway? And if the answer is no, then what does that say about God's knowledge, power, or sovereignty? This question is not theoretical. It shapes how we understand evil, suffering, free will, love, and even redemption itself. To approach this honestly, we must begin where Scripture begins, not with humanity, but with God's nature. One of the most difficult truths for the human mind to grasp is that God does not exist inside time. Time is not something God moves through. Time is something God created. Genesis begins with a simple but radical declaration. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That word beginning is not describing the start of God. It describes the start of everything that is not God. God did not wake up one day and decide to create. He did not wait, anticipate, or react. Scripture presents him as eternal, meaning no origin, no development, no learning curve, no surprises. Psalm 92 says, "Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." Everlasting to everlasting. God does not move from past to present to future. He sees all moments at once. This is why Isaiah can say, "I make known the end from the beginning, from ancient times what is still to come." God does not predict the future. He inhabits it. Here's where many misunderstandings begin. When we hear God knew, we imagine God standing at the beginning of time looking forward to see what humans will do. But that image is flawed. God doesn't look ahead. He exists in a position where every moment is equally present. What we call foreknowledge is not God guessing correctly. It is God knowing because he is already there. Imagine standing on a mountain watching a river below. You see where it begins, where it bends, and where it ends simultaneously. The river still flows freely, but your vantage point allows you to see what those within the river cannot. This is a faint analogy, but it helps. God's knowledge does not cause events. It comprehends them. So yes, Scripture strongly affirms that God knew the fall would occur, but knowledge is not the same as authorship. Now comes one of the most staggering revelations in the Bible. Revelation describes Jesus as the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. Before Adam ever breathed, before Eve ever chose, before sin ever entered human experience, the cross was already accounted for. This means redemption was not a backup plan. Grace was not improvised. Salvation was not an emergency response. Creation itself was launched with the cross already in view. Ephesians echoes this truth. He chose us in him before the creation of the world, according to the purpose of his will. God did not create humanity hoping things would go well. He created humanity knowing the cost. Which raises the most uncomfortable question of all. Why create at all if God knew it would lead to suffering? Here is a truth that cuts through philosophy and theology alike. Love without choice is not love. A world without the possibility of rebellion is a world without genuine obedience. A world without the capacity to reject God is a world without the capacity to truly love him. God could have created beings who only obeyed, but he desired beings who could respond. Choice is not a flaw in creation. It is a feature of love. When God placed humanity in the garden, he did not design a trap. He designed a space where trust could be real. The tree was not a test of intelligence. It was a test of relationship. Would humanity trust God's goodness or define good and evil for themselves? God already knew the outcome, but knowing the outcome does not invalidate the authenticity of the choice. Here is the tension that many people struggle with. If God knew humans would sin, didn't he make sin inevitable? Scripture answers this carefully. James says, God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. God's knowledge of sin does not make him the source of sin. The fall came from human choice, not divine manipulation. God permitted the possibility of rebellion, but he did not force the decision. This is the difference between permission and causation. God allowed freedom because without it, love would be artificial. And yet he also prepared redemption because freedom would be costly. Here is the heart of the matter. God did not look at the future fall and decide humanity was disposable. He looked at the future cross and decided humanity was worth redeeming. The cross reveals something profound. God judged creation not by its failure, but by its potential for restoration. The cost was not underestimated. The suffering was not ignored. God entered very pain he foresaw. The Creator stepped into the consequences of creation. This tells us something staggering about God's character. He did not create us because we were safe. He created us because love was worth the risk. So yes, God knew, but knowing did not stop him, because what followed sin was not abandonment, but pursuit, not destruction, but incarnation, not distance, but a cross. And that brings us to the next question. If God knew humanity would fall, then why design freedom the way he did? Why allow the serpent? Why allow the choice? Why allow the tension at all? If God knew humanity would fall, then why allow the choice at all? Why not create a world without the possibility of rebellion? Why not design humans incapable of disobedience? At first glance, that world sounds safer, but Scripture reveals something deeper. A world without choice would not be better. It would be empty. From the opening chapters of Genesis, one truth becomes clear. Humanity was created with the ability to choose. Adam was not programmed. Eve was not scripted. God spoke commands, yes, but commands assume the ability to obey or disobey. When God said, "You are free to eat from any tree in the garden," freedom was not symbolic, it was literal. The restriction of one tree did not cancel freedom, it defined it. Without the option to say no, yes would have no meaning. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil was often misunderstood. It was not poisonous, it was not magical, it was not evil. The tree represented moral autonomy. Eating from it meant declaring, "I will define right and evil for myself." The serpent's temptation was not about fruit, it was about authority. You will be like God, not in holiness, not in love, but in self-rule. The fall was not curiosity, it was rebellion. A common assumption is that the fall caught God off guard. Scripture says otherwise. God was not surprised. He was not scrambling. He was not reacting in panic. The question, "Where are you?" was not for information. It was for relationship. Even in judgment, mercy appeared, covering nakedness, preserving life, promising redemption. Genesis 3 already points forward to victory. The seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head. Before the dust of the fall settled, grace was already spoken. This is the question that presses hardest. Why didn't God intervene before the fall? The answer is unsettling but profound, because stopping the choice would have erased the freedom that made love possible. God did not create obedient machines. He desired covenant partners. Stopping the fall would have meant no real trust, no real loyalty, no authentic love, and ultimately no cross. The fall was permitted because redemption was planned. God did not create a world where sin had no cost. Pain, death, corruption, and brokenness entered reality. But notice this. God did not remove himself from the story. Instead, he embedded himself deeper into it. Every covenant, every prophet, every promise was moving history towards one moment, God himself stepping into human suffering. Which brings us to the greatest revelation of all. Love, redemption, and the God who stayed. If God knew humanity would sin, then the cross was not a response. It was a decision. Christianity is unique among worldviews for one reason. God does not remain distant from human suffering. He enters it. In Jesus, God does not explain pain away. He absorbs it. The same God who foresaw the fall, felt hunger, wept at graves, was betrayed, was beaten, was crucified. This is not the action of a detached creator. This is the action of a God who said, "If they must suffer to be free, then I will suffer with them." Scripture never presents the cross as plan B. Peter says, Jesus was delivered up according to the definite plan and foreknowledge of God. Before sin entered history, sacrifice was already chosen. Why? Because love without sacrifice is shallow, and redemption reveals the depth of God's love. The Scripture reveals that this way, the way of freedom, fall, and redemption,